1999's The Mummy was neither the first nor the last film to carry that title. But for anyone who came of age in the 90s, any mention of The Mummy immediately brings to mind images of Brendan Fraser rescuing Rachel Weisz from a digitally augmented Arnold VOSLOO. A huge action-adventure smash, writer-director Stephen Sommers' film revived Studio Universal's ailing monster movie property, launched a new franchise, and inspired scores of blockbusters that attempted a similar mesh of adventure, comedy, and horror. Did you know the following fascinating facts about the film that started it all? Today, I'm going to show you 10 interesting facts about The Mummy. Before the start of the video, make sure to leave a like, and if you want to see more content, subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Number 10. It was originally developed as an R-rated film. Universal originally had a hit with The Mummy way back in 1932, the success of which resulted in a series of classic mummy movies with a spooky tone. The studio started developing a reboot in the late 80s, originally seeing it as an R-rated horror franchise to compete with the likes of A Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th. Several acclaimed horror filmmakers were attached to this Mummy reboot over the years, among them George A. Romero, Clive Barker, Joe Dante, and Mick Garris, but their takes were all deemed too dark and strange. Eventually, Universal decided to make the project PG-13 and entrusted it to Stephen Sommers, then fresh from Deep Rising. Number 9. Tom Cruise was offered the lead role, but he passed. For The Mummy's lead role of Rick O'Connell, reportedly the first actor approached was Tom Cruise. He declined for unknown reasons, leaving the character to be passed over to Brendan Fraser, whose portrayal of the down-on-his-luck gunslinger became instantly loved. It then took almost 20 years for Cruise to get a second chance at the franchise. Cruise finally led a Mummy movie in 2016, where he was given almost complete control over everything from the script to the character choices made by other actors in the Alex Kurtzman reboot. However, Cruise's total commitment and perfectionism backfired, with the film flopping badly and killing all hopes of a Universal interconnected dark universe along with it. Number 8. Brendan Fraser was choked out for real, shooting the hanging scene. Early on in The Mummy, Rick is sentenced to death by hanging and is left dangling on the end of a rope when Evelyn, played by Rachel Weisz, successfully negotiates his freedom just in time. Alarmingly, Fraser came close to being hanged for real when the rope was pulled a little too tight, resulting in him falling into unconsciousness. Fraser later recalled in an interview, quote, "I remember seeing the camera start to pan around, and then it was like a black iris at the end of a silent film. I regained consciousness, and one of the EMTs was saying my name. Fraser stopped breathing and had to be resuscitated, which Rachel Weisz later admitted was traumatizing to witness." Number 7. CGI had to be used to preserve Rachel Weisz's modesty when her white dress got wet. The Mummy features extensive use of CGI, particularly when it comes to resurrected Imhotep, plagues of locusts, and undead priest zombies. However, digital trickery was also used for another purpose outside of creating monsters and insects that you might not have been aware of: concealing the accidental exposure of leading lady Rachel Weisz. In the scene where they are forced to jump overboard from a boat, Weisz is clad in a dainty white nightdress, in keeping with her character and the period. Of course, when this garment got wet, it became completely see-through. To keep things family-friendly, CGI was used in post to make the dress fully white again. Number 6. The Medjai were going to be tattooed head to toe, but the director decided it would be a waste to cover up Oded Fehr's good looks. Oded Fehr co-stars in The Mummy as Ardeth Bey, a warrior of the Medjai, an ancient brotherhood devoted to keeping Imhotep imprisoned. Incidentally, Ardeth Bey shares his name, although nothing else, with a character played by Boris Karloff in the original Mummy movie from 1932. However, Bey's look changed dramatically from the storyboarding stage to the first day of shooting. Originally, the idea was for the Medjai to be completely covered in tattoos from head to toe. But this plan was changed when Fehr was cast. Stephen Sommers felt that the actor was so handsome, it would have been a waste to completely cover his face, and so the tattoos were scaled back to specific hieroglyphs, such as the one spelling out Underworld on his forehead. Number 5. FRASER had to get the choreography perfect for his fights with the CGI mummies. As a large-scale supernatural adventure with heavy supernatural elements, The Mummy was a huge undertaking in terms of stunts and special effects. The cast frequently had to react to creatures and phenomena that were not there on set, and which would be added digitally afterward. This included a lot of mummies which FRASER did battle with. FRASER recalls that performing his fight moves for the high-tech motion capture camera was a real challenge, as it wasn't as if he could improvise and have the mummies added in afterward. Instead, FRASER had to hit every beat perfectly, later saying, quote, "It was programmed, and you couldn't mess up a move or improvise anything because then the camera wouldn't capture what you did." Number 4. Evelyn's library accident was shot in one take. Rachel Weisz's memorable introduction as Evelyn Carnahan sees the overzealous librarian struggling through her day job, inadvertently falling on her ladder and setting off a domino effect that topples every bookcase in the room. While a lot of the action in The Mummy is CGI, this particular scene was done entirely live in camera by Weisz herself. Happily, director Stephen Sommers got the shot perfect on the very first to take, with all of the falling bookshelves collapsing without a hitch. This must have been an immense relief for all involved, as shooting it a second time would have meant spending almost the whole day putting the library back together, simply to have a second shot at knocking it down. Number 3. Arnold VOSLOO had to be shaved all over twice a day. Arnold VOSLOO was offered the role of Imhotep by producer James Jacks, the two men having previously worked together on Hard Target. In contrast to that earlier film, The Mummy required VOSLOO to spend almost all of his screen time largely naked, and on top of requiring serious gym time on the actor's part, other beauty treatments were required. To maintain Imhotep's smooth head and body, VOSLOO needed to be entirely hairless. The actor balked at the idea of full body waxing, apparently having had his chest waxed once before and insisting on it never happening again. And so another strategy had to be employed. The makeup team resorted to shaving VOSLOO's whole body twice a day, something that took more time than you might expect. Number 2. The Mummy was such a big hit that the studio ordered a sequel the morning after it came out. Universal had high hopes that The Mummy would prove a success, and they were not disappointed. The movie was a huge hit, grossing $43 million in its opening weekend, the highest non-holiday May opening of all time. The film earned enough money and generated enough positive word of mouth on its opening day that studio executives ordered a sequel the very next morning. By the end of its theatrical run, The Mummy had grossed $416.4 million, despite coming out just a couple of weeks before The Phantom Menace. The Mummy Returns was a similarly big hit in 2001, and the spin-off movie The Scorpion King followed in 2002. It even became the year's second best-selling DVD after The Matrix, as families began to watch it over and over on home video. Number 1. All the gunfire is CGI. Shooting The Mummy in Morocco came with a lot of upsides. The cast could dress in their explorer gear without drawing much attention from the locals. They got to shoot at amazing locations that helped them buy into the atmosphere of the movie, and they had the full support and protection of the Moroccan military.